Ding! What? Oh, what's this? An errata? Hello and welcome back to Hobbyist Novitiate. I was just sat here desperately trying to regrow my beard, which I foolishly shaved off, when Warhammer on Warhammer Community announced a new FAQ and errata for Legions Imperialis. This is a long time coming and it's super exciting, so I thought it might be fun to just go through each of the changes, how they compare to the original rules, and talk about how it might change the shape of the game. I'm really excited. I've not really had much of a look through this, so this will be completely blind reactions and genuine emotion and excitement. I am actually buzzing about this. It's really, really cool. We've been waiting too long for this, so I'm really excited. So without further ado, grab a cup of tea and a biscuit and let's dig into it. So, Warhammer the Horus Heresy Legions Imperialis rulebook version 1.1. There's a big disclaimer at the top about how the changes have been implemented, I guess, and just some documentation notes. Boring, we're not going to look at that. Let's jump straight to the errata, page 48. Here we go, and we're looking at march orders. So the order for marching has changed from each model within a detachment issued with the march order may move up to a number of inches equal to twice its movement characteristic. If the detachment is made up entirely of infantry models that are not embarked upon a transport, blah blah blah, may move up to 3 times its movement. So that's how it was and how it is now. Each model within a detachment issued with the march order may move up to a number of inches equal to twice its movement characteristic, blah 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 blah, may not fire during the first fire or advancing fire stage of the combat. So, really interestingly, infantry no longer get their triple move when they march. I think that's going to be fascinating. Infantry being able to move 3 times as fast when they take a march order really lets them jump out into the midboard super quickly and can give some absolutely devastating effects when paired with close combat infantry. So they can't do that anymore. Page 49, movement, here we go. A movement characteristic of hyphen means models in the detachment cannot move, cannot embark or disembark from a transport, and the characteristic cannot be modified in any way. If such a model is required to withdraw from combat, it's destroyed. So all that's really saying is now that models that can't move can't go in transports, which I think most of us are already playing anyway, but it's nice to have some clarification there. Page 55, advancing fire stage. Change the second sentence of the third paragraph, hold on, 1, 2, 3, to the following. All detachments issued with an advance order must be activated in this stage, though they can be activated and do nothing. So that's removing any confusion about detachments issued with first fire, who should have already fired or been activated by this point. Simple, just tidies things up and shortens things down a little bit. Page 57, resolve hits. Bam, 57. Change the first sentence of the third paragraph to the following. A model can only be allocated a hit if it is an eligible target for a model in the firing detachment. In most instances, this means the allocated model must be in range and line of sight of the firing model. Interesting. So that means that you can resolve hits if any model in the detachment can see the targeted detachment, so you no longer have to have the specific model firing able to see it, which I think again is how people play this more or less all the time anyway. Page 72. Ooh, garrisoning structures. Add the following after the second sentence of the second paragraph. And the sentence being added is, a detachment can garrison a structure if this would bring it within the engagement zone of an enemy model, but not if it would cause them to become engaged. So that basically means if there's other people within an inch of the building, you can still go in there as long as you're not going to engage those units. Next up, page 72, engaging garrisoned structures. Change the third sentence. Infantry models in base-to-base contact with the structure count as engaged with all enemy detachments garrisoned within the structure. So you can no longer roll your tanks up to a building and somehow run over the people who are inside the building. That makes complete sense. I think that's a brilliant change. I think it clears up any kind of confusion there. Really good. That's the first one that I think is a change that just completely makes sense to me. Page 79, burrowing. Okay, so we're now into the weapon traits. I think a lot of these changes are going to be for various weapon traits. So burrowing. So now we're just adding to the end of that trait, weapons with the burrowing trait cannot target flyers. That makes complete sense. If you're underground, you can't attack people that are in the air. Nice one. That's a simple one. It's an easy win. Page 80, we're looking at engine killer now. So we're changing the first sentence of the first paragraph to, when a vehicle, super heavy vehicle, knight or titan suffers a wound caused by a weapon with the engine killer trait, they suffer a number of additional wounds equal to the number shown in brackets. So engine killer now works on vehicles as well as just super heavy vehicles, knights and titans. Simple, easy, brilliant. Vehicles have engines. If a gun is going to kill an engine, it's going to kill an engine in a vehicle. Nice. Change the second paragraph. Here we go, the whole second paragraph is changing. If a weapon has the engine killer trait and the rend trait, enemy vehicles, super heavy vehicles, knights and titans suffer a number of additional wounds, blah blah blah, if they lose a fight against the model that has that weapon. So again, that's just adding in the clarification that vehicles too now get affected by this change. Devastating if you can get some engine killer and rend on some vehicles. Page 83, bing bing. I don't know why I'm making those noises, that's a bit strange. I'm gonna try and stop that now. Page 83, Quake. This trait is changing completely as follows. If one or more hits are scored against a detachment by a weapon with the Quake trait, the next time that detachment moves, halve the movement characteristic of all models within that detachment. The next time that detachment fires, subtract 1 from the result of any hit rolls the detachment makes. This trait is ignored if all hits scored by a weapon with this trait are allocated to a target's void shields. So the main difference there is rather than saying that the effects last until the end of the round, they're just saying that the next time that detachment moves, its movement is halved, and the next time it fires, it's getting that -1 to hit rolls. So no longer does Quake need to happen before they've moved or shot. You can do it on them, and then next turn, as soon as they're moving or shooting, they're still suffering those penalties. I think that's nice. It just gives it a little bit more utilization. You can get that in a little bit more easily into games. Good work, Games Workshop. Page 84, Shock Pulse. So we are changing the entire first paragraph to if one or more hits are scored against a vehicle, super heavy vehicle, knight or titan detachment by a weapon with the shock pulse trait, the next time that detachment moves, halve the movement characteristic of all models within the detachment. The next time it fires, it can only fire with a maximum of 1 weapon. So again, bringing that in line with the same new rules for Quake, where once you've used it on them, it affects them whenever they come to next move or shoot. I think that's brilliant. Might make it slightly harder to keep track of, but actually gives you much more uses for the shock pulse. That's nice, I like that. Skyfire, page 85, boom. Change the last sentence of the second paragraph. All Skyfire weapons in a detachment firing at a secondary target must target the same detachment unless another rule overrides this. So essentially what's changing there is that Skyfire weapons can now target people who are not flyers. I think that's interesting. So you can use your Skyfire guns to target a secondary detachment that is on the ground, instead of only those that are in the air. Warp. The second sentence of the first paragraph is changing. If targeting a knight or titan, then the dice value of the weapon is 1. So now weapons with the warp trait are doing significantly less attacks against knights or titans than they may have been against a knight or titan on higher wounds. That's interesting. So they've had a bit of a nerf there. I wonder if that means we're going to get some warp stuff soon. It'd be nice to have potentially a whole new faction that could make use of these new warp rules. Maybe some demons? Page 87, Automated Sentry. So we're adding on the following extra section to the Automated Sentry rule. Models in a detachment with this special rule have a tactical strength of 0, and this cannot be modified in any way. So that means basically you can't chuck down automated sentries on your home objectives and have them hold that for you for the duration of the game. I think that makes sense. Sentry guns might be able to shoot people away, but they're not necessarily going to do much once you're actually on the objective. Page 88, Deep Strike. We're changing the fourth sentence of the second paragraph to if the model scatters off the battlefield into an area of impassable terrain or onto a structure, then that model and the model's detachment are destroyed. So we're just adding in that they cannot scatter off the battlefield. If that happens, they're destroyed. So just making sure that people know that there's an extra thing to worry about if you're deep striking near the edge of the board. We are also adding an additional paragraph. An Overwatch called against a detachment that has Deep Strike is resolved after all models have been set up and all other effects of that Deep Strike have been resolved, including disembarking models with the Transport Special Rule and the effects of the Orbital Assault Special Rule. So essentially, if you're going to Overwatch people that are Deep Striking, you're doing it after they've set everything up on the board and done whatever they were going to do with those things already. I don't think that changes too much. I think it's just a nice way of clarifying when things happen. I think that's good. Page 88 again. drop pod. So this time we are adding the following additional paragraph. Models in a detachment with this special rule have a tactical strength of 0, and this cannot be modified in any way. So essentially, any of your drop pods also can't be used to claim objectives, just like your automated sentries. There's no chance of dropping some drop pods in on your opponent's home objective and trying to claim that way. No. You have to have people in there if you want to do that. You have to have loads of people in there. Page 89, flyer is changing. We are adding the following sentence to the end of the third paragraph, which is our paragraph about activations during the movement phase. Models with the flyer special rule cannot call Overwatch during the movement phase. So your planes and the like can no longer shoot at enemies with an Overwatch during the movement phase because they're busy flying around, I guess. Page 90, forward deployment. Change the first sentence. Wow, straight away, right at the top, to after both players have deployed their armies, including infiltrating detachments, but before the first round of the battle, if all models in the detachment have the forward deployment special rule, the detachment may make a special move. So this is just clarifying again when those forward deployments happen, and it is after infiltrating detachments have been put on the board. I think that's nice. It's a small change, but it just helps really clarify the order of things when you're setting up the game. Good, nice, easy. Thumbs up. Page 92, infiltrate. Right at the top of page 92. Add the following additional sentence. A detachment that is deployed in this way cannot be issued a charge order during the first round. So now your infiltrators can't jump in really close to the enemy and then charge them straight away. I think that's just going to slow down that turn one a little bit, give people a little bit more time to react and maneuver. Page 93, master tactician. We're changing the first and second sentence to the following. A detachment that contains one or more models with this special rule may issue a command when it is activated. If the controlling player chooses to do so, they may select one other friendly detachment that has yet to be activated this round and is within 6 inches of one or more models with this special rule that are being activated. The select detachment's order token is discarded and replaced with a different order they were eligible to be issued during the orders phase of this round. That essentially means you can't change a detachment's orders to something that it couldn't have been given at the start of the round, so you can still do your funny shenanigans and changes to your plans that are going to throw off your enemy, but you can no longer do things that they couldn't have done at the start of the round. So the options are just slightly limited, but I don't think in a bad way. On to the next page, 96. Transport. We're adding following to the end of the first paragraph. Models can only embark onto transport models from the same army list. So now your Marines can't get into your Dracosans, your Solar Auxilia can't get into your Rhinos. I don't think that changes too much really. Most people probably weren't doing that. I suppose it means that if you're doing a Mechanicum army with some Solar allies, you have to sort of think a little bit more carefully about which transports you're using. Page 120. Here we go, we're jumping ahead a little bit. We're now into actually changing the missions themselves. We're changing our breakthrough secondary objective to the following. At the start of the first round, before any order tokens are placed, the player with this secondary objective secretly notes down up to 5 friendly detachments that are either deployed on the battlefield or embarked within a transport that is deployed on the battlefield to be carrying some supplies. I think that's just clarifying that now you can't give the supplies to people who are embarked within a transport that's not on the battlefield, which might have been a sneaky way that some people were getting around that. You actually definitely 100% have to have the people with supplies on the battlefield at the start of the game. Otherwise, rules as written in the original, you could put your supplies on some Marines in a Rhino, throw those Rhinos in on a battlefield edge, and just auto-score your breakthrough. I think that's a nice way of just really making sure that people aren't being cheeky with that one. You know who you are. Now we're jumping ahead to some changes on the detachments themselves. This might be the most exciting bit. Page 152, we're looking at the Storm Eagle Squadron. They are losing Tempest rockets. That's being axed from the game. That seems interesting. Maybe I'm being really blind, but my Storm Eagle Squadron doesn't have Tempest rockets on it, so maybe that's something that they have taken out of prints of the book at some point already and just want to make sure that it's off of everyone's lists. So interestingly, no changes. People were sort of expecting some changes to some of the support Marines, but we're not getting any of that. That was our only change to any of the detachments, and it's one that doesn't seem to exist anyway. I don't have any Tempest rockets. Do you? Do you? Page 164. Ultramarines, here we go. We're changing some of the Legion special rules. The first sentence is changing to, an Ultramarines model may reroll any hit rolls of a 1 when firing upon an enemy detachment that has already had 1 or more hits scored against it this round by an Ultramarine model from a different detachment in the same formation as the firing model. That's just clarifying that for the reroll of the 1, you have to be a different detachment to the one that's already shot it, so you can't stack that buff in weird ways. Mostly just a clarification rather than any kind of change. Next up, 168, the Word Bearers. True Believers is changing. Detachments within a Word Bearer's formation never count as broken for the purposes of being issued an order. For example, they can be issued any order they normally could instead of just the advance or charge order. That's just clarifying. I think they must have made a mistake there initially by saying that they could advance or march rather than advance or charge. No real change there aside from just covering up a mistake that they made in this book. 171, Alpha Legion, mutable tactics is changing. The first sentence is changing to, at the start of the battle, before any detachments are deployed, for each formation in an army made up entirely of Alpha Legion detachments, ignoring allied contingents, the controlling player may select up to 3 Alpha Legion detachments in the army to be affected by mutable tactics. So that, again, rather than changing how anything works, is just stating that it has to happen at the start of the game before any deployment happens. I think that's just a nice way of telling you when it needs to happen. And that is the end of the Errata. That's all the changes in this here lovely book. Not quite as many as I was expecting. There's sort of a lot of fiddly rules in here I was sort of hoping for a bit of clarification on, but maybe they're only doing a small Errata because there's going to be more stuff to come soon. Hopefully. Now we come into the FAQs. Here we go. Question: are engaged and pinned detachments issued orders as normal? Yes, they are. If an engaged and pinned detachment makes a pile-in move while issued a charge order, do models that were not in base-to-base contact still gain the fight bonus if they move more than 1 inch? Yes, they do. That might be interesting, actually. Next up, does a detachment that's on the losing side in a combat and fails the morale check receive a fallback order in addition to making a withdrawal move? No, they do not. That's a really big one. I think that has been a point of quite a lot of contention in the community where a lot of people have been talking about how that should work, but I think that clears it up nicely. Next up, if a detachment with a movement characteristic of 0 or dash is not within detachment coherency, can it move in order to avoid models being destroyed? No, it can't. Makes complete sense. The detachment cannot move. If a structure is within range of an objective marker, are all models garrisoned in that structure treated as being within range of that objective marker? Yes, they are. Fantastic, that's how I've always played it anyway, but nice to know that we're playing correctly. If a structure collapses, can surviving garrisoned models be placed in a position where they are engaged with enemy models? No, they cannot. Again, that's quite a useful clarification to have. It means that you can no longer sort of jump out of a building straight back into engaging other enemies and fighting. You have to go somewhere away. When firing a weapon with the Firestorm trait at a structure, is every model garrisoning the structure hit? Yes. So that again is something that I think has come up in games that I've played when I've had my trusty Malcador Infernus, who's never actually managed to fire, but we've always ended up having the discussion around it. Now you can hit every model garrisoning a structure. If a detachment with the automated sentry special rule has another model assigned to it or attached to it, such as by use of the commander special rule, can that detachment be issued an order? No. So you cannot put your commander, attach him to some automated sentries, and then give them orders randomly. That, I think, makes complete sense. Detachments with the automated sentry special rule cannot be issued orders. Does this mean they will automatically be issued an advance order when activated as per the no orders in the movement phase rule? No, it does not. They have their own thing, they do their own thing, forget about that. If a detachment has dedicated transports, is it required to be deployed or arrive from reserves embarked upon them? No, it's not. So you don't have to be within the transports at the start of the game if you don't want to, but you can be. Is the limit on the number of legate commanders permitted in a solar army based on the total agreed points limit of the battle rather than the total points value of detachments in that player's army? Yes. So that's good. That means that in larger games you can have more of those legate commanders even if you're bringing along a formation of allies from somewhere else. That makes sense. I like that. That's good. Finally, I'll get to use my second legate commander base. Do detachments or models that do not count when calculating the breakpoint of a formation, such as dedicated transports or detachments with the automated sentries or drop pod special rules, count towards reaching the breakpoint of their formation when destroyed? Yes, they do. That's interesting. So your transports although they don't count towards calculating the breakpoint of the formation, still count towards breaking the formation when they're destroyed. So you've got to take care of your rhinos a little more than you did before. If a detachment in a broken formation is on the losing side in a combat and is forced to make a morale check, is the result reduced by 1 as per the rules for broken formations, in addition to rolling 2 dice and taking the lowest as stated in the determined combat result? Yes. So you now have sort of double trouble for sure if you're a broken formation in combat, so you've got to really watch out for that compared to, you know, maybe not doing that before. Is the penalty to hit rolls imposed when firing at a detachment in dangerous terrain cumulative with the penalties to hit rolls imposed by other terrain types? Yes. So you've now got to really think about what terrain you're in as well as what terrain they're in when shooting at people in dangerous terrain. You can end up with some real debuffs there, I guess. When a model with a variant of the transport special rule is destroyed during Overwatch, are transported detachments placed within 2 inches of the destroyed model at the point in its move where the opponent chose to resolve the Overwatch tax? No. That's interesting. There's a little designer's note to clarify what happens here. So when moving a detachment, players should establish the start and end point of a move first, and then once the line of movement of each model from start to end point has been determined, the opponent can then sort of select at which point along the line they want to overwatch. Regardless of where the overwatch takes place, players should assume that the move is completed before any transported models are destroyed and removed from the game. So you can still reach the end of your movement to disembark even if the vehicles are destroyed. I'm not sure I agree with that. That doesn't really make sense. If a rhino blows up with some marines in it, it kind of blows up when it blows up. It doesn't wait for them to get out half a mile down the road and then blow up. If a detachment has dedicated transports, can another model which joins that detachment through a special rule, such as commander, also embark in one of those dedicated transports, assuming there's sufficient transport capacity? Yes, they can. That, I think, is how everyone's always played this. Your commanders can go in transport with the rest of their detachment. Can a flyer with the hover rule that enters the battlefield from reserve replace the flyer special rule with the skimmer special rule when it's placed on the battlefield? No. So it has to still do its move to get the skimmer special rule. Can special rules which require a detachment to be within a certain distance of another detachment, such as Inspire, take effect while the detachment or model is embarked on a transport? No, it cannot. So interestingly, you can't inspire troops that are in a Rhino or a Dracosan until they get out. Can special rules which require a detachment to be within a certain distance of another detachment, such as Inspire, take effect while the detachment is within a structure? Yes. So not if you're in a transport, but yes, you can inspire people in a structure. That's interesting. If a model that is equipped with 2 weapons with the engine killer and rend traits wins a fight, are the engine killer values cumulative when calculating how many wounds are suffered by the losing model affected by the engine killer trait? Yes, they are. So if you have 2 engine killer rend traits, you're going to add those engine killer values together and do that much extra damage. That's going to be nasty. I like that. If an independent unit is forced to make a withdrawal move after being on the losing side in a combat, is the detachment core of the same detachment also required to make a withdrawal move? No, it's not. So your assault marines that were initially part of the same detachment as your tactical marines, if they lose a fight and have to run away, the rest of the detachment doesn't have to. That makes complete sense like that. Again, just a real clarification of, I think, what we were already doing, but making sure that that is the official way to do it. Can an eligible detachment use the infiltrate special rule to deploy outside of a player's deployment zone, garrison a structure when it's deployed? Yes, it can. So using your infiltrate move when you're outside of the deployment zone, you can just jump straight into a structure. That's cool, I like that. If an Ultramarines detachment fires weapons with the light trait at a detachment that would cause hits to be discarded, do the hits still count as having been scored for the purposes of the Ultramarines interlocking tactics special rule? Yes, they do. Good for the Ultramarines. So you can still sort of stack your bonuses if you're shooting at tanks with light weapons. A nice way to ensure you're going to do some damage later on, I guess. Are large movable elements such as the doors on drop pods considered to be insignificant elements for the purposes of measuring distances? No, they're not. So your movable doors can be used to measure distances from. So you probably want to build the drop pods open. There's a designer's note here. When models such as drop pods are set up on the battlefield, they should be set up with the movable doors in the open position. Interesting. So don't glue your doors on your drop pod shut, I guess. The final one, here we go, last one at the end. If a transport is within 1 inch of a structure, can models disembark straight into that structure, thus garrisoning it? No, they can't. So you can't jump straight out into a building, which I think is a probably pretty fair way to do that. That's it, that's all the FAQs in Errata. There's not quite as much in there as I was expecting, it's only a few pages, but it's still nice to see that we're getting something after all this time. Hopefully the fact that it's quite small but has come means that there's more plans to do things sooner rather than later. I'm sort of hoping maybe a second edition. The dream, I guess, would be to have 2 new factions released, maybe Custodians and Demons, and then roll all of that with all the expansion books into one new second edition rulebook with all of the changes that have been made, and hopefully some new ones as well. Well, that's it. I kind of wasn't planning on making this video. It's not going to interrupt our usual Friday releases or anything like that. Just saw it and got excited and wanted to talk about it. So hope you enjoyed. Let me know below if this was something that you were interested in and want to see more of. If you don't want to see more, also let us know that and we just won't bother next time. Hope everything is good with you and you're enjoying what we're doing, because we're really enjoying it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing and all of that. It's been really, really nice having the channel grow as much as it has already. It's kind of a lot more than I was expecting to begin with. So big love to all of you. And I promise that my beard will be back soon. So until next time, see you then.